I've seen that guy somewhere. On TV.
Not sure I hope it's long underwear character.
Alright guys, it's time. We're gonna do the final part of the Spider-Man Allies display. Whew. This has been a marathon, but it's been a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have putting it together, because it's been a blast. So we have 4 more figures to add to this collection. So by Jove, let's do it. We're gonna bring in, as of creating this video, Spider-Man's roommate, Boomerang. Now, I say as of making this video, I'm actually reading on Marvel Unlimited, so I'm 6 months behind, so I'm assuming they're still roommates. And it's a dynamic that has proven to be a lot of fun, actually. I like that kind of, it's the original Odd Couple sort of dynamic. So Spider-Man and Boomerang with their third housemate, who I forget. It's the nephew of Robbie Robertson, isn't it? It's his nephew. So the 3 of those guys together, it makes a fun dynamic. As for Boomerang himself, this is a character who goes a little way back, and until Superior Foes of Spider-Man, he was always C-list, if I'm being generous, but Superior Foes really did elevate him. He's this great, fun, sneaking, scheming, underhanded, they really fleshed out his character. Before, I think he was kind of a generic one gimmick villain. He's a villain who throws boomerangs. And now there's just so much more to him. He's, if you'll pardon the expression, he's a douchebag. He's a total douchebag who sits around on the couch all day in his underwear playing video games, annoying his roommates, doesn't care about, anyone else besides himself, which makes him so much fun. Because as a character, you like a-holes because you get to live vicariously through them. So this Boomerang is a pretty basic figure. There's not a whole lot going on. He's got his Boomerang backpack, which is a nice addition. Although, I mean, it should be there. That's his costume, so I'm not going to pat Hasbro on the back for giving him a Boomerang backpack. He's supposed to have it. But still, it looks decent. He's got his 2 throwing boomerangs. So people who make fun of Hawkeye in the Marvel movies for only having like a quiver full of arrows, this dude has 4 boomerangs. And granted, the whole point of them is that they come back, but still, he's not got a big deck to play with. The figure itself, like I said, is fairly basic. There's not a huge amount of extra sculpting or anything going on. The head is a good representation. Again, straight out of the Superior Foes comic line. This is exactly what he looks like, so credit where it's due on that. There's a little bit of scuffing and marking on the white paint. Come on, Hasbro, you're literally using 2 colours. How tough is it to get 2 colours just right? But there you go. I guess they do manufacture a lot of these. He has the Thunderbolts insignia on his belt. I think this was like a variant that they did for a whole bunch of characters, was slap a Thunderbolt on them. I don't know how often that occurred. I know I've got Shocker with a Thunderbolt on there as well. I've read most of Thunderbolts. I don't remember Boomerang being in the Thunderbolts, but I guess he probably was at some point. So either way, I figured he might be a villain, but he's technically an ally of Spider-Man in a way. They have teamed up on occasion with the whole Odd Couple dynamic, so he can go in the Spider-Man display as an ally, for now at least. And next on the agenda we have Hobie Brown, the Prowler. Again, this is a character who's come into prominence a bit more recently, debuting way back. I don't know when exactly, but I think he's like a 70s character. My mind conjures up 70s style artwork. So I think he debuted in the 70s, and he had a really funny kind of design for his costume because it looked really baggy. It looked like he was getting up to no good in his pajamas. It was quite odd. Since then they've made his costume a bit more streamlined and sort of a typical superhero type costume, sometimes designing him with an armor kind of effect, which I think looks really cool. And again, funnily, like so many Spider-Man villains or just supporting characters, green and purple. Just the design team love green and purple, and I mean it does. It pops. It looks really good. Would I like them to mix it up a little bit more? Yeah, but still, the green and purple does look really great on this figure here. The yellow design paint job on the chest actually looks very, very clear. The lines are very, very smooth. They've done a good job of not having any blurring or anything. So the actual sculpt of this it's decent. It's very, very decent. They haven't set the world on fire. There's a lot of reuse in the figure. There's not much original sculpting going on. They have the wrist gauntlets and the boot gauntlets. Do you still use the word gauntlet for boot? I don't know. Bootlet? Pfft, get out of here. Anyway, they're very loose. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like they should have been sculpted to the figure, and someone was like, it's gonna cost us an extra bit of money to sculpt them to the figure. It's a new sculpt. And then they were like, you know what? Screw it. We'll just make them separately and slide them on there. So it's like there's a little bit of gap. There's a little bit of light you can see through there, and it feels a bit slapdash, if I'm being honest. It feels a little bit slapdash. But that notwithstanding, the claws look great. That's a nice, I think maybe a Black Panther hand. So you can imagine him sort of clinging into the walls as he's scaling a building. The mask itself also looks decent, and I like the way the cape kind of makes like a neckerchief here as well. Like it sort of comes around, which is part of what the character looks like. It's what makes him just a little bit more distinct. Now then, we do have the cape itself, speaking of that, and it's the typical plastic molded cape, which, like so many others, it looks good, you know, at a distance. It's very, very effective. And I do prefer this to cloth capes. And when you start mixing cloth and plastic, I feel like it just doesn't really work. There's some dissonance there. But the only problem with the cape, of course, is that, yes, you can't really manipulate it at all. It is how it is. And when you place a figure like this in a display, this cape is going to obscure. It's going to take up a lot of space. So anything behind it needs to be taller. Otherwise, it's just going to get obscured. With that in mind, I'm going to place Prowler very proudly at the front here. But fortunately, the folks behind him have been elevated, so he's not going to obscure anyone, and everyone gets their spotlight. Coming in towards the home straight now, we have a character who I love the design of. This is one of my favorite visual characters, which is funny that I haven't actually read many comic book appearances of him, but every time I see him on the page or in toy form, he just jumps out at me. Deathlok. Deathlok looks badass. I mean, what's cooler than a zombie cyborg? You like zombies? You like cyborgs? Well, guess what? we've got both. A zombie cyborg just looking like a badass, and sometimes that's all you need. Is he a cool character? I don't know. I've not read that much of him. I have, of course, read Maximum Carnage. Boom, there you go. Another one for Team Spider-Man. Team Carnage is starting to get a little bit outnumbered. Hasbro really, really need to give us a Carrion and a Shriek. I think Shriek looks very likely with Venom 2 coming out, when I think there's rumors that she's going to be in that. Give us a comic book Shriek. I'll be very, very happy. And Carrion, he's an old classic character. He needs to be represented. I think Nightwatch was on Spider-Man's team as well, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that one. But Deathlok looks absolutely terrific. The detail on the sculpting here is just wonderful. Check out the zombie face. The zombie face with the cyborg side to it as well. So much fun to have displayed. He's got the great mechanical looking musculature going on there, which is a design style that I always loved. When they did Heroes Reborn Iron Man, the Iron Man suit had that kind of look as well. And say what you will about Heroes Reborn, but I like that feature. Also, he's got 2 guns, so they've done well with the accessories. He's got one in the holster, which can be removed. If you're gonna do a gun in a holster, make sure you can remove it. Come on, I don't like molded in guns. That's no fun. And of course, he has this huge Gatling gun here. And ever since 1987's Predator, I think we can all agree there's never been a cooler gun than a Gatling gun. Or a minigun, whatever you want to call it. Terminator 2 solidified that. You got a damn minigun. Yeah, and Deathlok holds this like a badass. I try to very often, pop the left hand underneath so he's kind of holding it like that, but when you're dealing with a display that is getting a little cluttered, that can take up a lot of space. So I'll happily have Deathlok just kind of rest it down by his side, and I don't know, the left hand's looking very Shakespearean, like he is about to, give out some big soliloquy or something. Is this a cyborg head I see before me? But the fact is, he looks great with the piping around here as well, and the red and silver, and it's just this match of colors that makes the figure come to life and really stand out on the shelf. Also, one thing which might be a little peculiar, a little quirk of my own, is that he has the American flag here. And for whatever reason, I really love it when characters incorporate the American flag, because there's something about it that just comes off as very sort of militaristic, and it's something that sort of resonates with characters like Nuke has the stars and stripes on there as well. And there's something a bit sinister to it. I'm not saying anything sinister about America or anything. Don't get me wrong. But characters who sport that kind of look, there's something very sort of single-minded about them. You've got the same. You've got Deathlok, you've got Nuke, and then in other media, like there's a movie called Hardware with a robot that has the stars and stripes on its face. It looks kind of militaristic and scary, and there's just something scary about characters with the stars and stripes on their face. Something sinister. You can't trust them. And again, that's not saying anything bad about America or the stars and stripes. It looks great. Come on. Who doesn't love Captain America? That's a good example of someone who rocks the stars and stripes. Anyway, this figure is just pure good fun here, and he reminds me of the Spider-Man time when he got sort of turned into like sort of a bit of a cyborg by Deathlok. I think I've not read the story fully, but it's a skin in the Spider-Man game, which looks like a lot of fun. That would make a fun figure for Hasbro to release. We can chuck him on the Spider-Verse shelf. So Deathlok is going to get a great spot here with the Spider-Man allies. And what kind of a comic book display would it be if we didn't have Wolverine represented at least once? Now, I can't even start to list off all the times that Spidey and Wolverine have teamed up in the past. I mean, they've had their own team-up comic come out for several issues, and there were some really good fun stories in there. Some great art by Joe Madureira and Adam Kubert as well. So Wolverine and Spider-Man have a long-standing history with each other, and when they're written really well, I love the dynamic between them, because even though they're kind of polar opposites as characters, Wolverine being like tough, gruff, no-nonsense, badass, and Spider-Man being, Spider-Man. I love that they actually do represent the fact that Wolverine has this begrudging respect for Spider-Man. He sees the way that Spider-Man will leap into battle, and the selflessness that he displays, and Wolverine respects that, and I love the dynamic that makes between them. I think it's a real shame that they cut away all of Spider-Man's more personal ties with the Avengers with Brand New Day or One Day More, whatever that awful story was called, because when Spider-Man was living in Avengers Tower, the back and forth that he would have with Wolverine on the whole was always really, really great. They made a great team together. There was some garbage writing sometimes. I think there was one issue where like Spider-Man got jealous of Wolverine flirting with Mary Jane and threw him out a window, and I'm like, that wouldn't have happened, but there you go. Anyway, this figure, I think this was the first Wolverine figure I got. I acquired several more after this, but it's one of my favorites. Casual Wolverine is the best, I think, and this is a great representation of him. It's sometimes tricky to get a decent looking Wolverine face, and I think that this Wolverine face actually does the character a lot of justice. He's got that little wry smirk, like someone's starting trouble with him and he knows, like, I'm gonna mess you up, bub. The cowboy hat, of course, doesn't come off because the hair would look very strange underneath. But I think this is a great representation. I'm really happy with this figure. The claws stand out really well. What's a shame is that the character, the Wolverine that came out with the bone claws in the Love Triangle 3-pack, obviously because he's wearing his gloves, you can't give this Wolverine bone claws, but I think he would look terrific with them. I think you may be able to pop the claws out and replace them, but I don't trust myself to do that. So instead we're gonna have basic adamantium clawed Wolverine just standing there, just looking kind of badass, and I really love him for that. He's a great addition. Guys, are you ready? It's the last piece of the puzzle, the final addition to this Spider-Man Allies display. Here he is, my all-time, no joking, my all-time favorite comic book character. It is Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider. So being a Ben Reilly fan means that I am long suffering, because he was featured so prominently in the early 90s, which was exactly when I started reading. He was my Spider-Man. I started reading right in the middle of the Clone Saga. The first issue I bought was Amazing Spider-Man 401, just after Aunt May dies, and we're introduced to 3 Peter Parkers having a face-to-face like Mexican standoff. And I just, as a kid, I'm like, what is going on here? And it's crazy because people always say, oh, you know, having all these different Spider-Men, all these different Peter Parkers is going to, you know, scare people off. They're not going to want to get into it. For me, I was fascinated. I was like, how did this happen? What is the rich history that brought us to this place, and how many comics can I buy to find out about it? You know, this just sucked me in. And then of course the whole point of that story, whether rightly or wrongly, was to turn fans off of Peter Parker and bring them onto Ben Reilly. So all I saw was Peter Parker acting like an unlikable character and Ben Reilly being a really cool guy. So I imprinted on this guy like a baby bird, and ever since he's been my guy. And I think this was the first, it wasn't the first Marvel Legends I got, but he was one of the first two. It was either this one or the Ben Reilly proper Spider-Man costume. I think that was the first one. This was the second one. And he's such a great representation, this figure. I mean, just take a look at him. The perfect blue and red up against each other. The detailed sculpting on the belt. The belt is just terrific. I love the whole point of the Scarlet Spider costume was that he didn't want to be Spider-Man. He was thrown into the situation. He had to just grab whatever he could. So he got like this ski suit, threw on the hoodie, and he had just little pockets and pouches that he carried with him for emergencies. So it looks so makeshift, and it looks terrific. The only gripe that people have about this figure generally is that he has the black around the eyes, which is not comic accurate. In fairness, the comic Scarlet Spider, it was just the plain white lenses, but they fixed that with the vintage re-release, which has a beautiful red metallic sort of paint job, which I really, really like. And of course they took the black away from the eyes, which is, you know, a nice way of distinguishing the two. Plus the vintage one comes with the blonde Ben Reilly head, which, mwah! It looks terrific. Put that on the Ben Reilly Spider-Man. Oh, such a good look. I'll save that for my Spider-Verse display video when I eventually get to that in a bajillion years' time. In the meantime, though, this Ben Reilly kicks ass. And, you know, there have been some rumors. People claim that Ben Reilly was brought back into the 616 universe, into regular continuity a couple of years ago. There was a story called The Clone Conspiracy, and they brought him back. Yeah. No, that's not Ben Reilly. That's a guy wearing Ben Reilly's face. I refer to him as Brino, Ben Reilly in name only. And when I say I refer to him as that, I mean I'm just referring to him as that now because I don't have any friends that I talk to about my obsession with Ben Reilly because he seems to scare people off. Go figure. But yeah, so this is the real Scarlet Spider, not the gun-toting, Mephisto-dealing, soul-repairing, weird, stupid, garbage character that Peter David was writing. I'm sorry, I know Peter David has a lot of fans, and I think his Incredible Hulk run is greatly lauded, but his stuff on Scarlet Spider was just the worst. And the character was sort of reset at the end of Spider-Geddon. So, you know, after being killed and resurrected about 20 times, this newest resurrection, he was like, oh, I feel like my soul has been reset to how it originally was. Don't try and backtrack. All right, if you want to bring back the proper Ben Reilly, then admit that the one who died in Peter Parker Spider-Man 75 wasn't the real Ben Reilly, and that Norman Osborn has the real Ben Reilly in a tank somewhere, because why would you kill the one perfect clone, the only perfect clone you ever made? Wouldn't you want to keep that for like future research to find out how you could maybe clone yourself perfectly? No, you wouldn't just kill that off. And of course, if he was a perfect clone, he wouldn't have dissolved away when he died. So, there you go. Ben Reilly's still out there. The real Ben Reilly is still out there. And one day we'll see him. But until then, we've got him in plastic form. And I am going to place him as the final piece into our Spider-Man display. And there you go, guys. That is Spider-Man's allies right there.
That's not possible.
I've seen that guy somewhere. On TV.
It's been a hell of a trip, but I'm glad you could go on it with me. I've had so much fun making these videos, and I feel that my sort of skills as a video YouTuber have improved throughout this process. So I really hope that no one like, sort of finds my channel and then just watches the first video and is like, wow, no, I don't want to watch any more of this. I need to put like a disclaimer like, this is the rough early stuff. You know, it gets better, honestly. So guys, we are done and I've had a blast doing this. So all that's left now is to move on to a new storyline. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, I was about to say I'm going to drop you a hint. No, I'm going to straight up tell you. I'm going to model, so to speak, one of my favorite 90s one-shots, and that is Sabretooth in the Red Zone. So we're going to go to the X-Men next. But once we're done with that, I want to hear, what do you want me to cover? What comic stories or ideas do you want me to work on displaying? Also, I'm going to do more reviews, so let me know what you want me to review. I know that, you know, there's a lot of new figures that are going to start coming out. I'll do reviews for each new figure as I get them as they come out, but I want to do more reviews because they're fun. So I'm going to go back and do some old classic figure reviews. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching these videos. It's a blast making them. Like, share, and subscribe. Get those numbers up because I love the little dopamine hit when I get a little email come through saying, you got a new subscriber. And I'm like, oh man, I didn't know you cared. So guys, thanks for being Marvelous Legends, and I'll see you all soon.